without further ado, I want to turn this over to a person who has been a longtime client and has also become a friend, Peter Licata, and he is the CFO of DiRx. He has been very, very reliant on SAP technologies and services. But what I want to say is, though Peter comes from the life sciences and pharma space, I think he's able to really speak to any client's journey, especially from a financial perspective. Peter has worked in public. Peter has worked in private. Peter has worked for companies backed by private equity. Peter has worked for companies that are bootstrap and grassroots. And Peter has really, as I said, been able through his career and journey to really see the plights of all different companies and, really the pain points that can ensue. So with that, I'm very, very, very appreciative to turn it over to Peter Licata, who will kind of share his perspective. Peter?
Thanks, Ken. I don't really have much else to say based on that lead-in. But so as Ken said, I've been in organizations mostly in the pharmaceutical industry, but public, private, foreign entities, mostly with, I think the term Ken used was plight of the accountants and the people that usually have to run these types of selection processes for ERP and implementations. I've been in environments usually starting with Quickbooks through Great Plains, SAP B1, SAP S4 HANA, and everything in between. Situations where I've walked into new organizations and tried to get a balance sheet out of an ERP and it didn't balance. So, ultimately, I think that the term plight or pain points is really a focal point of this type of discussion, right? Ultimately, as accountant or finance or organizations, it's all about getting the right tool and the right controls in place, the workflows, making sure that things are assigned out correctly, people are signing off and moving their job functions forward in a way that you can track. It's very important. Everybody understands that, but they having gone through multiple implementations with different implementers as well and different products. These are very high cost, depending on which you choose, but high cost, high exposure, high disruption to the organization. So you really do have to have the right team on board internally and mostly externally with the implementer. The SaberPoint, for example, will be able to help with the understanding of the product. You need to have people that understand the product soup to nuts. They have to understand the business flows. So especially with organizations that are at different points in their life cycle, some of the transactions and the workflows that you are going to need very early in your cycle are going to change. They're going to be different as you get 6 months, 9 months, 2 years down the road, and you need to have a tool that can take you through the reasonable life cycle, and you need to have an implementer that understands from beginning to end what your business is going to look like. So it's very important to be upfront in the setup, make sure that you have that team in place. Ken brought up a jack of all trades, and it's very important to be understanding of your industry, but ultimately need an implementer that understands order to cash, understands how to actually get how transactions are going to work, how transactions are going to flow through your business. How are you going to collect cash? How are you going to pay bills? How are you going to work with the banks? They seem like basic questions when you go through the thought process of selecting ERP. But again, the implementer is really what will drive a successful product and a project. So I can't say enough about Ken and his team. I use a quote now. I hope it's going to be mine, and somebody will find it famous down the road. But ultimately, you get to a point where you have an opportunity to, you say you like working with people in the past, but when you have an opportunity to work with them again, you choose to work with them because of the people they are and the help they bring to you. I also joke, I'm actually only about 27 years old. This is this gray hair and gray beard is really related to some prior implementations before Ken and his team. So I can't say enough. I am open and available to any type of questions that anybody has as well, whether it's offline or through Ken. Like I said, I've lived this plight. It can be months of not sleeping if you don't have the right help. And that help is implementer and the product, right? Make sure that you select the right product in the portfolio that you need to choose, and make sure that you get a successful project by making sure that you're not overdoing what you need to do. And with that, like I said, it's very helpful to have an implementer that understands businesses from the beginning to the end of their life cycle. And that end doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing. It just could be what your time frame is, whether it's moving out to equity, private equity, going public, things like that. A poor selection on an ERP never gets discussed until the valuation starts to get hit, because you can't get information to a potential suitor or a potential buyer. So again, the key information that you can get out of these systems and have available at your fingertips, if implemented correctly, is really important down the road.
Peter, obviously, I thank you so much for those comments. And what I'd like to also just share with the audience, which you've more than kind of conveyed, but it all starts with a partnership. And when we were privileged to be introduced to you when we worked with your organization, you were right there with us, and you were really an advocate, but at the same time, you communicated what your needs are. And I think it was the flow of communications and our back and forth interactive communication that really led to the success of our project. And I, really stress that to the audience, that any type of project or program you're in, it really is the partnership, and it's really the communication. And Peter, you exemplify that. Peter, before I turn it over to the next speaker, just want to, again, for the audience to know that Peter, very uniquely in his CFO role now with the company DiRx, is a very dynamic, and it's a company that is purged for scale and growth. And I figure with that, Peter, as you were talking, it made me think about a question. Here you are. I mean, there's all different companies in different states of their business, especially now with the pandemic and with just the absolute craziness that has gone on from an economic perspective. But Peter, just maybe at a high level, can you share any perspective, maybe insight to people, the audience that's out there, that as you move into 2021 and we're still in these uncharted waters still, what kind of things will you do to leverage your SAP or your technology in general to stay proactive, to be as competitive as possible, and just ultimately stay ahead of the curve from a P&L perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I think the most important thing is obviously to make sure that you have your workflows in order. A system like a Quickbooks, for example, it can't support that. People can log in, people can do what they might need to do, but there's no tracking of that information. There's no way to pull together any of your business analytics, and basically getting information to your management team, right? So again, the key thing I'd look at is the workflows, sign-offs, and the controls that will happen automatically. You don't have to call somebody and say, did you post that entry? Did you book this activity? Did you take care of what you needed to take care of? It's all system generated. There's a lot of best practices in SAP and with SaberPoint and their team, understanding what people are looking for. So having reporting that can be generated, pretty quickly, real time, or at least consistently without having to, you got to get on the phone. You're not walking. You can't walk right around the corner to somebody and say, "Can you prepare this information?" There's really a lot of items that you can leverage through the right technology and getting it in place, and getting it in place early, as opposed to 6 months coming to the decision that you need to implement a new ERP solution after you already need the new ERP solution. It's problematic. You have to be planning ahead and making sure that you have that squared away. I mean, this pandemic, we don't know how long it's going to last. I can't imagine at this point it's the last one we'll see. There are always instances of hurricanes, tornadoes, storms, things like that. There have been times where, I've had to drive around barricaded roads to get to the office to be able to book deposits and make sure that we get money into the cash to continue business. So again, you have the right tools in place and the right workflow set up. That happens. I don't want to say automatically, but it happens in a way that isn't, literally pulling up your pants and walk through a wet parking lot to get the job done. So I hope that answers your question.
It really does.